Hi guys, good morning. And today I'm in LA and this is probably going to be one of my favorite episodes, and I'll tell you why. I have the CMO of BodyBio, again, back on Biohack-it. If you guys are new to our podcast, please check out the first recording I did with Jess. It was amazing. It was during season 1, and we talked about the supplement industry being so unregulated and what really works. And I also have my personal and Jess Berman's personal doctor on today, Dr. Kristine Profeta. And it's such an honor to have you on Biohack-it. You've helped both of us so much with our health. And just learning from you has been such a pleasure over the last 6 months. So thank you both for coming on and doing this with me in LA.
Always.
Super excited.
So the first thing I actually want to go into, so we prime our audience. What is cellular health? Do you want to go first, Jess?
No, I'm going to hand this one to Dr. Profeta first.
All right. So answering that question, I think you have to sort of have a shift in thinking from disease management, which is what healthcare is today, right? It's what disease do you have once you have enough symptoms to create a stir to go to the doctor and try to figure out what's wrong. Right. And then the step is towards defining wellness. So I have patients all the time coming, having seen 10 different people and different ideas about what they have. And I said, well, never mind that. Where's the roadmap to get better? How are we going to get you better? And what defines wellness, which is, I think, what we want to talk about today. Yeah.
That's a really good way to look at it, because I think unless you know what's going to keep you well, what is the point of, understanding what the disease is going to do for you anyways, or not do for you? Yeah. Jess, what about you?
I think for me, the simplest way of looking at it is there's nothing more root than a cell. And we talk about root cause and root cause analysis at companies, and you talk about root cause medicine, but the cell is where disease starts. And so we're missing a large part of the conversation in terms of wellness and not healthcare, but preventative medicine and longevity, if you're skipping cellular health altogether. And there's little elements, right? There's specific things like NAD or urolithin A. These are tiny kind of levers that you can pull, right. But when the whole picture is disrupted at the cellular level, none of that's really going to matter.
And when we get into this conversation, I want to also ask, in your definition, because people are going to hear about this in the podcast, what is a phospholipid?
I like to just say it's a healthy fat. It's technically not a fat. It's technically an oil. They're these beautiful bioactive lipids that they're moving, right? They're literally active, and they make up the part of our cell that's like this bubble that encapsulates our cell and it protects our cell. Bad stuff should be on the outside, good stuff in your organelles, your nucleus, your mitochondria on the inside. This is this wall that protects it. It's a bilipid layer, so it has like 2 elements to it, and these little tails on the inside, and Dr. Profeta can speak a little bit more to the actual science, but that's how I kind of picture it. It's the wall that protects your cells.
Yeah, so super fun topic because I'm a biochemist and I love to talk and think about these things. So the biology of life is the difference between water and oil, right? That is right there. The heart of life is the separation of fat from water. And the way we have a cell, like the how a cell gets made is through the different phospholipids, which have slightly different size, and phosphatidylcholine, one that we'll be talking about, happens to have what's called the largest head group, which is the part of it that sticks out more towards the water. Mm-hmm. And then it has these little fatty tails, and it makes a bilayer. And it literally, by definition, if you threw it into a bunch of water, they would group together and form a sphere. That's the very mechanics of how our cells formed in the very first place hundreds of millions of years ago. And inside that sphere is where we have the nucleus, the mitochondria, and all the little what are called organelles. But that's the heart of life. And so if you can keep the cell membrane, which is what we will be talking about in terms of our health and why cells are important, if we can keep the cell membrane healthy, the cell membrane is a lot of like what you'd liken your keyboard to if you're trying to send out email messages. I say this all the time, like the hard drive is the nucleus. You can live without your hard drive for a little while. You cannot live without a cell membrane that is optimal. So that's the real key.
And how does that play into, because obviously, you have a family practice, so you're seeing toddlers all the way to adults. And people are walking in, and now you see this more and more with these diagnoses of ADHD and autism. So I want to hear from you. A, how do you feel about those diagnoses? Because we were speaking about that a little bit earlier. And two, how do you apply these therapies that you've learned and worked with to work around some of these diagnoses that people get?
So this may be one of the more controversial statements that I'm comfortable making, because I tend to be a real moderator in my thinking, my practice, and my approach to everything. I'm really not sure what ADHD is as a disease. It's a label that includes a constellation of symptoms related to basically lack of focus and self-stimulation in order to keep focus up. And so therefore, I believe ADHD can almost under all circumstance be treated at a root cause level. And most of the root cause is the lack of neuroplasticity, because toxic burden is internal to the brain, central nervous system, the cellular. So we've helped countless number of children come off the spectrum of ADHD with just detox support and the use of these bioactive oils, supplementing with PC. I mean, we can go into the conversations about bringing back verbal and other things that the young people are struggling with today, but their brains just are not being supported properly, period.
And do you feel that's the same when it comes to things like autism as well? Because the spectrum is so large on both. And I hear from a lot of people that there's also a misdiagnosis on the autism spectrum.
So autism is more, far more varied in causal elements. Hard a bit to talk about because there's some idea of vertical transmission of inflammation that could be affecting the early autistic spectrum. So never comfortable to speak of those things. And then there are children that start to develop spectrum-like behaviors after some months. And there can be, basically inciting events. Those could be medical events. Those could be, I have a great example of children, for instance, during the pandemic that were furloughed in homes that had black mold and were neurotypical, and then all of a sudden started to take a very different toll. One thing I just want to say as a scientist of the microbiome, the gut is priming the central nervous system until about 3 years of age when it has a more organized relationship. So one of the reasons that the spectrum disorders are not formally diagnosed, I believe, is because they can't be, because you can change them up until about 3. They are very changeable. And so at 3, that's when the gut-brain axis starts to have a more standardized, relationship, and it becomes more difficult to change the microbiome after that.
And Jess, you see this a lot as well, right? You have this incredible Facebook group. Moms are writing into it. Their kids are having, certain developmental issues. They're saying, hey, do we have ADHD? And then you guys have got them on PC. The moms start taking it and then give you guys great feedback in the groups.
Always. I think you can be led down so many different paths in today's world, and you can think it's one thing, and you can follow someone on social media who's saying something, and there's so much information that we're taking in at any given time. So we started the Facebook group as just a community where people who have been failed by the healthcare system can help one another. But we're constantly seeing things like my child's nonverbal and started talking, or this is really helping in X, Y, and Z ways. I think that if you look at like the larger picture as a whole, I think a big part of this conversation and the awareness that we're trying to bring forward is the world we live in. And this is not from like a fear place. You and I talk about this a lot. The world we live in is toxic. When BodyBio started 35 years ago, I don't think my grandfather ever envisioned the world as it is today. And Kristine's known my grandfather for a very long time. They were working with like the sickest of the sick, and the protocols that they had developed early on in the 1990s and early 2000s were really to stabilize extremely ill people. Now we're seeing aspects of that, like mini versions of that everywhere. And so it's across the board. It's how many people are reacting to mold in the way that they are. It's mast cell activation syndrome. It's cancer in younger people. It's ADHD and autism and all of these things together. And just acknowledging that the world we live in has changed. We've introduced tens of thousands of chemicals, and these things are affecting us. And where are they affecting us? At the cellular level. And so this is why I'm so passionate about having this conversation. This is why I'm so passionate about what we do at BodyBio, but also bringing forward voices of clinicians who are seeing this on the front lines and seeing how people can change their health by really getting to not this, excuse my language, bullshit root cause, but really getting down to the root of what's causing these issues.
Kristine, I was so excited just on the tail end of what Jess is saying. There is this whole like thing about like how chronic disease and cancer and all of these things are rising in children and also in adults. And people are like, oh, it's pseudoscience, but we're just seeing that it's clearly tied to environmental stressors being introduced, such as chemicals and all that stuff. In your practice for, 20 plus years you've been doing this, what are you really seeing, and where is the correlation coming in between people are getting sicker?
No doubt.
And what is going on here that it's not pseudoscience? You're seeing the research. You know me, I'm always on the hunt for ways to level up my health game. And let me tell you, I've learned that when it comes to overall wellness, all roads lead to the gut. 70% of the human immune system resides in the gut, making it a crucial factor in overall health. That's why I'm thrilled to introduce to you our newest partner, Jonah, the most advanced microbiome company on the market. If you're like me, always looking at ways to optimize your health and well-being, you're going to love this product. Jonah isn't just another health app. It's a cutting-edge AI platform that analyzes your microbiome to unlock your body's full potential. Imagine having a personal health detective that dives deep into your gut to uncover the root cause of your symptoms. That's Jonah for you. They use state-of-the-art technology to get a comprehensive picture of your gut health. This isn't science fiction. It's a personalized model of your biology that helps predict how different factors affect your health. Personalized nutrition recommendations. Based on your unique microbiome profile, Jonah provides tailored dietary advice to optimize your health and enhance longevity. Whether you're aiming to boost your energy, improve your digestion, or simply feel your absolute best, Jonah is your new secret weapon. It's like having a team of microbiome scientists in your pocket working 24/7 to help you achieve your health goals. Ready to experience the precision of wellness? Visit Jonah, Jona.health today and start your journey towards optimal health.
Yeah, no, it's not pseudoscience. It's a reality. It has everything to do with the toxins coming in so quickly. And, there's a whole school of prolific research and support to talk about the role of the mitochondria and mitochondria in cancer, and cancer as what's called a metabolic disease. So that's actually where, many scientists believe that that's in fact where it starts. Sure, there are genetic pathways that are more prone to cancer, and there's a lot of research, fantastic research has been done to show that. But the bulk of cancers, aside from a very, very strong family history with a direct link, are epigenetic, meaning they are acquired, and they are being acquired through two primary pathways. One is the mitochondrial pathway. So the mitochondria are these little organelles. I'm going to just take a sidestep because I think they're the coolest things around. I mean, they're
agreed.
Mitochondria are the coolest little. So just go back 350 million years ago plus, right? Oxygen was on this world and planet, and it's an incredibly oxidizing substance, very dangerous. We all know about, the need to block free radicals and protect ourselves. Well, what causes free radical damage? Oxygen is one of the worst. So these little mitochondria are out there, and they eat oxygen, and they make energy and water. So we thought, well, how cool. Let's just stick them inside us. We'll do a trade-off, right? They'll eat our oxygen, and then we'll give them all these advanced substrates and this really cool place to like swim around and live. And that's how we started to live with mitochondria.
Yeah.
So we've continued to do this dance with them. They eat our oxygen, they give us water and ATP. And what scientists discovered 15, 20 years ago was its inception was the fact that they do way more than that. And they actually are the hub of the link to our immune system. And one of the books that I wrote that has yet to come out describes this, which is basically the different forms of metabolism that our T cells have to defend us are being governed by the mitochondrial state. So effectively, when you have a toxic load that has blunted the mitochondria's ability to respond, you have high levels of inflammation, very little governance of DNA replication, and basically a dysfunctional immune system. That's like a setup right there for cancer. So it doesn't matter if you're 2, 20, or 80, when this happens, you are at risk for this for cancer starting or other metabolic diseases that are a result of this.
You also have seen so many people come through the door and be like, hey, hi, Dr. Profeta, I have this chronic disease. You're like, wait, let's take a step back and address it from this place of like removing the toxins and getting your body back to baseline. Yeah. Can you give us some antidotes of some people that you've treated, whether kids or adults, and how, kind of what was the process for them?
Yes, there's actually so many stories. It's a little hard to even remember all the things. Like in the early years when we started to see success with things that I had been told are not supposed to be curable, I wasn't not making the claim that I was curing anybody. I was simply saying, here are things. So I say this all the time, wellness or optimal health is like a seesaw, right? So it's identification of stressors on the system, and the stressors have just grown because our environment is putting so many stressors on us now. And then it's the use of these important bioactive oils and minerals and electrolytes and all the things that BodyBio has that are needed to support the system. So you can kind of look at optimal health almost in two ways. If you remove all the stressors, you need less balancers, right? But if you don't address the stressors, you need a ton of balancers, like gobs of stuff to keep you basically.
Can you even remove the stressors these days?
Exactly. So we've worked with almost every pathology out there and had significant success with it. Even things like autoimmune conditions that have resolved. I've had children start speaking again that were on the spectrum and nonverbal. My own child, when I was learning about the oils, at around a year plus of age, having had 3 boys, I was entirely personally aware of what my child should be developing like. And he had like 20 words at about 18 months. There are so many 18-month-old boys that have 20 words and nobody thinks anything of it. But for my children, I knew it wasn't right. So I ended up using PC on him and some other things that I tested and sort of identified. 20 to 200 words in 2 months. Like it was an explosion of vocabulary. And if I had gone to my pediatrician, they would have just been like,
never. This
is like totally normal, nothing to do. And then OT. What does he need therapy for? He's a normal child. He should be speaking the way a normal child speaks. They don't need, if they're interacting with other children and doing normal things, why would they need therapy?
Right.
It's just counterintuitive. It's an internal issue. It's not external.
So what do you think it is like about the PC that changed? So what do you think it is that like giving him PC helped to do what?
So PC is doing so many things, and this is from all of the testing we do. So obviously it's repairing the cell membrane. Yeah. It's shoring up the levels of phosphatidylcholine. So just another little quick soundbite. I don't want to go too much into biochemistry, but the cell wall has certain components, and we have the ability to make some of those components, not make some. PC is the best thing to be there, but if it's not there, we make things in our body that are stiffer and not as good for us. So that's what it's doing. It's going in and replacing some of these other fats that are not optimal. In addition to that, however it's doing this, but this is done with serial testing and clinical outcomes, it is protecting us from the return of toxins. So once we've detoxed a patient, we keep them on a maintenance dose of PC, children and adults. They don't get toxic again at a certain level. So, you could go and saturate yourself and that would be a different situation. But in terms of normal living, you can take an adequate amount of PC daily to protect yourself from so much of what we are experiencing.
And just your personal experience with like PC. So you worked at BodyBio now for 7 years.
Yeah.
Your grandfather started the company in 1998. So this is a family-owned, family-run business. Yeah. You had some personal health issues that I know you spoke about, when you and I first sat down the first time. But can we talk people through like your thing with PCOS and how it's a metabolic disease and how you used BodyBio products, including PC, to cure yourself?
Yeah, I when I was 32, I went into a fertility doctor in London, the one that everybody was going to. He did an ultrasound. He said, you have polycystic ovaries. How regular have your periods been? They weren't regular because I was on birth control for many years. Yeah. And I think the synthetic hormones kind of set me up for a path that is very unnatural. And I was it was like my late 20s, early 30s. I wasn't necessarily thinking about all these things. I had GI issues, but I managed my grandfather helped me get rid of those over time. And the PCOS was a big shock because it was like, you're not going to get pregnant yourself. You are pre-diabetic. You will have diabetes in 5 years. And here's metformin and Clomid. And it's like,
oh God.
I walked out of there crying. My best friend happened to be in town, so I went and sat with her crying hysterically. Next day I called my grandfather. He set me up with a doctor in London. I did some testing. And it's very clearly, it was driven by diet, lifestyle, like specific things that I could very easily change. Right. Cut out coffee, cut out alcohol, balance my blood sugar, make sure I was eating consistent, eating the right way for my body, eating more fats particularly, and taking certain products. So there were a couple products I really used for PCOS. Obviously PC every day, balance oil every day, butyrate for regulating blood sugar was really helpful for me. I personally use maca. I don't think it's necessarily for everybody. I think I used DIM for like 1 month. I was pregnant within, 3 months.
Right.
First pregnancy that came back, was a miscarriage, which I actually really see as a blessing because I think it was also, and we can talk about this, but it clears away it's like clearing up your mitochondrial health for the next baby. And within 2 months, I was pregnant again with our son, Bear. He is now almost 7. And I had zero problems getting pregnant with the other two. I did not plan them whatsoever. I've, 2 of my babies are 16 months apart. And even the youngest was like a total surprise. I remember when I got pregnant with my daughter, I thought I had gallstones. I went and got an ultrasound because I thought I had gallbladder problems. And they were like, surprise! Could you be pregnant? And they were like, you might want to do a pregnancy test. And I went home and did it by myself. And I called my doctor. I'm like, how is that possible?
So funny.
I mean, I did total baby brain.
So I did not know we shared, I was diagnosed with PCOS.
Wow.
No way. Totally. At 30, it was PCOS, no periods, total mess. I'm sure I was hyperinsulinemic. I've had 15 labels, none of which I have.
Right.
So 15 things that I was never supposed to get rid of.
Exactly.
That was one of them. I would say that I have 3 boys and tried 4 times. So pregnancy was not, fertility was not a challenge. So it's all, what was it? This is what I say all the time. What was it? I had all of the symptoms. I had the testosterone, I had the they did the ultrasound, I had the pearls on my, that was like the top guy at Cornell, the top person. There was no hope for me to recover from that. It was like, good luck getting pregnant when you want to. I was like, this is horrible.
Look at fertility rates, right?
Yeah.
So like these PCOS is an easier one.
Yes.
Endometriosis is almost like an easier one now. Now it's these unexplained fertility problems.
Yes, I know.
And how do you see these toxins affecting things like fertility?
Well, one thing I can say is the opposite of that, which is we have had so many oops with patients coming through treatment. Where they get treated, and I have to tell them, especially if they're doing IV PC, I have to tell them, listen, if you're not planning to have a baby, you better be using protection because the probability of you getting pregnant is very high right now. So, and that's also because the cervical mucus is necessary to conduct the sperm transfer up into that's all, PC is in all of our mucous membranes. It's a huge part of surfactant and everything. So if the PC levels are low, you're going to have problems making anything related to PC.
That's so exciting to hear the connection between metabolic health and fertility, because I think so many of us are walking around, and that's kind of why I came to you, right? Because I'm petite, but I was walking around chronically inflamed, and I did not realize it till I came to you, got my testing done. All of a sudden, I finished my protocol. I'm 6 months, and everyone's like, you've lost so much weight. I was like, I have not lost weight, guys. I've lost inflammation and gained muscle mass. Yeah. I've shrunk, and because I've shrunk, I realized I had a metabolic disorder. I was not healthy, but yet I walked around thinking I'm healthy and I'm biohacking and all that stuff. And then I had to get myself on sodium butyrate, do the PC, all of that stuff. And now I feel like I'm finally in range. So I want to hear, you've obviously gone through it as well.
Yeah.
Why do we, people like Jess and I, lose that sort of chronic inflammation and not realize we had it? Because I guess we're small to begin with, so we don't think we're metabolically unhealthy. So how come that firstly, where's metabolic disease really coming from these days? And 2, why is it that when somebody finishes a protocol, they just shrink and all of a sudden they're like a brand new human?
You want me to go? I'll take a whack at this one. All right, so we have to actually go into the microbiome science a little bit to understand this. So many different ways to answer this, but I'm going to try to keep it as targeted as possible. So once we look at the microbiome, which is a very large biofilm within our body that's teeming with microbes, hundreds of, trillions technically. So science sort of says every one cell of us that's human is hosting up 10 to 100 bacteria. And that does not include the viruses, the fungi, and the parasites that are also there. So we are like a little ecosystem, a little pond, like we're walking around with all this stuff in us. So when we have inflammation, particularly the fungal layer, which was identified in around 2010, it was discovered that we actually have what are called commensal fungi. So commensal just simply means like the way we think of probiotics, those would be commensal bacteria, like the good guys, right? Yeah. Rather than pathogenic Salmonella, E. coli, et cetera. So we have the similar situation going on with fungus within the gut. However, the thing is, they have two ways of behaving. One is very antagonistic and it drives inflammation. And if they get, I'm just going to use a very simple, if they get pissed off, they start to flourish and create like little mushrooms, right? If you drive home after a few days of rain and all of a sudden you have mushrooms growing, same exact macro, micro. When you see what's going on outside, it's the same way that the microbiome responds. One of the reasons people get headaches when it's humid out is because there's changes in our internal environment that's reflective of our external environment. Wow. So the fungi can get really pissed off, and they do, from Wi-Fi and antibiotics and all these other things. And unless they're put into the dormant state or encouraged, and that's where all our anti-inflammatory things that we take, omega-3s and other things, that have an anti-inflammatory property to them, part of the way in which they're doing that is by down-regulating the fungus. And so they're calming it down. And when they calm down, they lose their side chains, which bind water and all this other junk that makes people feel very inflamed. So fastest way to say it scientifically, that's why you feel better and are less inflamed when you detox.
Yeah, because I was just shocked at my results. Everyone's like, oh, you lost weight. I was like, I've been on the scale. I might have lost weight, but I've gained muscle mass. And I kind of just shrunk all over. And I was like, wait, that was all the damn inflammation that I was carrying. Yeah. And so that's what concerns me about, look at the standard American diet. People are chronically inflamed. People like me and Jess are inflamed. Other people are chronically inflamed. Yeah. And so people listening to this, right, how can they check for inflammation in themselves? If they're like, hey, we want to check how inflamed we are, what are the markers they have to test for? What are some of the labs they should be getting? What are their signs and symptoms to be like, I think I'm inflamed? This episode is brought to you by Biooptimizers. Are you tired of tossing and turning at night, unable to quiet your racing mind? 4 out of 5 Americans aren't getting enough magnesium, and it's affecting their sleep and overall well-being. I used to lie awake for hours worrying about my to-do list for the next day. It was a vicious cycle that left me exhausted and unproductive. That all changed when I discovered Magnesium Breakthrough. Since adding it to my nightly routine, I've been falling asleep much faster, staying asleep much longer, and waking up refreshed. It's been a game changer for my sleep quality and energy levels. What sets Magnesium Breakthrough apart is its unique blend of all 7 forms of magnesium. Unlike other supplements that offer just 1 or 2 types, this comprehensive formula supports everything from stress management to muscle recovery. Experience the power of optimal magnesium levels for yourself. Go to biooptimizers.com/biohack-it and use promo code Biohack-it to save 10% on your first order. Subscribe for even bigger discounts and free gifts, ensuring your monthly supply is always guaranteed. Don't let sleepless nights hold you back. Try Magnesium Breakthrough today.
So actually super easy, like physical self-check would be, how squishy are your fingers with your rings? How squishy are your ankles at the end of the day? Like, do you feel like your calves, like your socks leave like these big puffy marks, right? Or your rings are really hard to get on and off. Like, those are soft signs of inflammation. Then the internal signs are more like sort of fatigue and brain fog and just sort of feeling like you're running upstream all the time. These are not hard things to check for in labs. It's just that labs are not being analyzed accurately. Like, we're sort of taught as a physician, having had 2 trainings, we're taught to pick up the really big, bad uglies in labs, like the things that would land people in the hospital or suggest a serious disease process. But we're not taught to analyze labs for wellness, right? So even a simple, what's called a CO2 is everybody gets a metabolic panel when they go to the doctor. That CO2 can actually give you some suggestion as to how healthy your mitochondria are, because it's on the low side or even actually abnormally low. It just gets skipped over generally in the outpatient setting because it's sort of thought like you can't be running around with metabolic acidosis because you'd be in the ICU, but it really needs to be in the normal range. So if it's in the normal range, you're doing much better metabolically. There are other things like there's a lot of misinformation about ferritin as a precursor to iron stores. It's actually an acute phase reactant. It's made in response to inflammation. We don't want ferritin levels high in our blood. We don't, period. We want iron levels normal, but we don't want ferritin levels jacked up. Wow. Even other things like MCVs, which indicate how much methylation capacity, and homocysteine, how much methylation. Subtle things that everybody's getting tested, but they're not really being looked at analytically.
Yeah.
Wow, I had no idea about the ferritin thing at all, because I was going to like, your ferritin's low, and it's like...
Yeah, that's not bad. As long as your iron's fine, that's a good thing.
Right. It's like, because they scare you. They're like, oh, your ferritin storages are being eaten up and this, that, and the other. So it's, And that's where I think within and anybody listening to this, that's where I also think the difference comes in between like this alternative health functional community, as well as why it's important to match yourself with a practitioner who has the kind of outlook that I feel that you've taken, because otherwise you can go down this rabbit hole and get extremely confused with what people are trying to feed you. And it can get very overwhelming very quickly for people.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Like extremely.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I completely agree.
Another thing I want to get into is Lyme disease. So Lyme is
I love Lyme.
I love
Lyme.
I
didn't know I had Lyme until I saw Dr. Profeta here.
I know that.
I had no idea.
You told me this. That's why I'm bringing it up. So for anybody listening, by the way, the origin of Lyme is in the 1960s. And this, I saw this little...
You're getting into a controversial place here.
She's taking us someplace. We're gonna have to back out of it.
Let's get into it.
This is my observation. I will not ask you to agree or disagree with it, but this kind of just some research that I did. So in the 1960s, the government bioweapons lab started injecting ticks with...
Oh, you're going deep.
Listen.
Yeah. Why not?
Exotic diseases. Soon people nearby began to get these diseases. Now tick-borne Lyme is an endemic. Naturally, the government has admitted nothing. It's fine. But I want to see it's not fine technically, but so many people are getting diagnosed with Lyme, and it's very, very, very dangerous. It's super scary.
I feel like Lyme is like everywhere. Lyme to me is like SIBO.
Right?
Yeah, Lyme is
IBS. But it's freaking dangerous.
It can be.
Let me take it back to like the place where I think we can sort of dig in a little bit in a safe
safe environment.
in a safe sandbox, right? So stepping aside from the politics, which are rampant, and I always tell every single patient that we have this conversation, I say, listen, you go to 10 different doctors on the subject of Lyme disease, whether they're specialists, infectious disease, primary care, you are going to get 10 different opinions. Yeah. So let's just start with that, right? I'm just going to tell you my opinion, but it's not going to be the same as the 9 other opinions that you get from your other doctors or from online or social media or whatever. So wherever, however it was developed, yes, Lyme has definitely become much more endemic. And what I would say at the very least is a simple statement. Nobody should be having procedures for arthritis, right? Knees replaced, joints being looked at, invasively injected, et cetera, without a Lyme test. The number of patients that I have had, young included, that are getting joints instrumented or even replaced that have not had a simple Lyme test that is shockingly positive through regular labs. We don't have to go to fancy things or fancy conversations. It has to be part of the standard workup. It's just not right to say, we have airplanes, Lyme flies. There's no way that Lyme is not all over the country. And this old notion that it's in Connecticut or out in, the Hamptons or in Nantucket. And if you live, just this week, I had a patient, well, I live in Oklahoma. My doctor said it's not here. I was like, okay. I'm sorry, but
oh my God,
these things travel.
Yeah.
So I think that it's really, really important to know just a few things. A, people do need to be tested. There's no question about it, particularly if you're living in endemic areas, but I think everybody should at this point. And the second is, it doesn't have to declare itself as the classic disease pattern in order to think it might be. So it goes into dormancy and reappears with very elusive symptomatology. I had it myself. I had it myself. And it wasn't a big part of my story, but I lived it and I do know how it made me feel. And, different joints hurting for a day or two, causing you to like skip a workout, and next day it's gone, and then your other knee is sort of bothering you, and you're like, oh, I'm going to go get a massage because I'm just doing too much. That could be Lyme disease. It doesn't have to be this debilitating end up in bed thing. So those are the medical talking points. The talking point that I think is more relevant to our whole conversation is, who does it make sick?
Yeah.
And the people that it makes sick are the people that have the terrain, the toxins, the impaired mitochondria. That's how Lyme gets in and makes people sick. And I say this all the time. It's usually not about the bugs. It's about the terrain and getting it super strong so that you can get over it. Because you should be able to get over it and get on with a normal life. The idea you have to have it for forever is not accurate.
Can we talk about, what is it that builds that terrain? Like, what is it that you recommend for everybody listening to take away from this? And like, what is it that builds a healthy terrain and foundation in our world that we live in today?
I mean, I think it's a lot of the things you offer with your supplements. It's making sure bioactive oils, PC, making sure vitamin D levels are normal.
Do you like supplemental D?
Sure.
And then sun as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Sun is really important. I mean, the idea, you know, I talked a little bit ago about the importance, and I think you would support this too. When the diet has healthy fats in it that are non-oxidized, the skin actually has a natural ability to sustain sunlight without oxidation. Yeah. Like, I grew up afraid of the sun, thinking I was going to burn when I walked outside. I have Italian heritage. My kids have never worn sunblock other than like the first couple days of summer where they might be overexposed. But we let them tan naturally, use coconut oil on the skin, and it's fine. Right. So that's a huge thing. But going back to the point, I think when the terrain is healthy, fungus is a breeding ground for Lyme. Huge connection. We could have a separate podcast on that. So if you've got Candida, you got Lyme for as long as you have Candida, you're gonna have Lyme. You've got to get rid of the Candida in order to get rid of the Lyme, because they feed each other.
So when I started, just before I came to see you, I used to have Candida, and then we worked through it, on the protocol that I was on and stuff. And it's so funny. For me, Lyme might not have been rampant, but I would get this sore knees when I was working out. So I wasn't chronically in bed or really affected, but every time I pushed myself too much to work, I was like, damn it, my knees hurt. Or on a long flight, my knees hurt on like a 5-hour plus flight. Yeah. And then all of a sudden I was sitting there the other day and I thought to myself, because I was flying to LA, and I was like, shit, my knees aren't hurting. Because my husband thinks I'm just whining because I was like, oh, I just want a flat bed. And he's like, you're just being a brat. And I was like, no, my knees hurt on long flights. Like, I have to be flat. And for the first time in years, it did not hurt. And I was like, it's because I've cleared out the Candida.
Yeah.
So anything that maybe was a little bit at baseline that was bothering my joints, I've been able to clear it out.
And decreasing the inflammation overall.
Correct.
Setting up a better terrain in the body. I love this. I talked about this on a podcast I recorded yesterday, the day before. And it was about like, how do we provide this healthy terrain? And I think for a long time, we've thought about terrain from the place of the gut. Yeah. And we don't necessarily think about our cells in the terrain picture. And it's just interesting that it's all kind of coming together now.
Right. Do you know of the paper? There's a paper that describes the relationship of the spirochete with the cell membrane and how it steals. It does like an alligator roll on the cell membrane.
It literally log rolls over the cell and just
I think the author's LaRocca. I'm trying to remember because I used to talk on this. But it literally goes up and does like an alligator, like a little roll, or the crocodile roll rather, and steals all the PC. Because it can't make it, if I recall this correctly. I mean, chance I'm wrong, but I think I remember correctly because I used to talk on it. So that's a fast way. Like, one of the ways that people get neurological Lyme, it's not like a tons of spirochetes running amok in the brain. It's that they're stealing all of the PC and people can't think. They stutter, they can't speak well. Right. You don't need to nuke them with antibiotics. You need to give them a ton of PC to get their neurocognitive stuff back. And when I talk on this, particularly at Lyme talks, like, you don't know what you're dealing with until you replace the terrain and give them all that good stuff. Because, maybe they need IVs. Maybe they don't. They don't. Maybe they just need to be replaced.
Oral PC. By the way, for anybody listening, just so you know, the statistics on how much Lyme has gone up is 68.5% from 2017.
Wow. That's crazy.
The statistic, just to show you what we're dealing with. And then we walk around and we're like, why are we having infertility? Why are we having this? because of the toxins. And I would just say it's some man-made diseases that we're dealing with due to our environment that we're living with. And people are walking around undiagnosed. And it's like a ticking time bomb. This is going to go off.
It's this bucket analogy, right? It's the how much can you have in your bucket? And we've talked a little bit about, and we're talking about while we're out here in LA, like children being born with a higher toxic bucket than ever before. So it drives me insane when people say, well, we have better rates of detecting these things now. It's like, no. That cannot be it.
No,
because
that's not it.
Who heard of this stuff when we were growing up?
It.
There was no such thing as ADHD.
No.
I'm 41. There was no such thing when I was growing up.
Kids did you know? Now they say it's 1 in 22 in the state of California.
Yeah.
No, it's
crazy. And state of California is probably healthier than a lot of other states in the U.S.
I don't think down at the cellular level.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. So this is how it's sold, but between the water system and all that stuff, how healthy
and the herbicides
really is.
and pesticides and various different things that are affecting our health. But I think, this conversation about children being born with a higher toxic burden, how that's going to affect disease rates in the long term over the next, 20, 50 years, I think is really quite astonishing.
Well, I want to talk about, because you guys will be talking about this over the next few days, prenatal health, the health of the mom, which derives the health of the child. So can we talk about, how does a mother preparing for a pregnancy? In Asian culture, mothers prepare for a year before they even plan to conceive.
I love that.
This doesn't exist
Let's
in the West.
bring that here.
Right?
Yes.
Let's bring that in. Prep your body for a year.
Yes.
Slow down, clean yourself out, set that intention so the vessel essentially is clean. And for somebody personally who's going through infertility, I can tell you these are things that I was never taught, right?
Yeah.
So for women listening and that are interested in fertility or just conceiving even naturally, what should they be paying attention to?
Well, one of the comments I was going to make earlier, but I'll make it now in regard to this, and it's not. First of all, this subject is very emotional, and being a mother of 3 children, having dealt with quite a few different things around early childhood and all these things, I'm quite aware of the emotions attached to it. So I'm saying it very, very sensitively. But in Chinese medicine, when you look at fertility, you reproduce a healthy host, right? A healthy host is what conceives. We don't have that appreciation in this country. We have a very disease-driven model.
Yeah.
Get rid of those annoying symptoms. Just take a drug that's going to do this, this, and this. And now you have to worry about 40 things. Like you turn on the television and you hear all of the things, like tell your doctor if you have all the rest of that. So we consider disease a real nuisance. We just want to get on with our lives, including just getting on with having babies. So there's drugs that override the body's natural way of saying, no, I'm not producing eggs right now. Because I'm not right. I'm not producing eggs because I don't want the eggs out there. So I'm not saying that's under all circumstances, and I'm not judging because as I said, I've walked my own walk with many, many perilous conditions.
Yeah.
So I've been right there with many people. Yeah. But that's a very Chinese medicine way of looking at the whole concept of fertility. And that speaks to the fact that in the Asian culture, they prepare the woman who is a vessel. And that is never done here. And we don't even think about the fact, I love this study because there was a study done a while ago now that looked at, we used to believe that the placental blood circulation was sort of impervious, right? The baby was a protected environment. Not so. The baby, the average umbilical cord has 267 chemicals. And that was while ago. That was 20 years ago that study came out.
I want to look up how much they have now. Yeah.
So if you think about it, we have 0 studies of the impact of these chemicals on the developing brain in utero. It's a little bit actually, it can be scary, but you know what? You can do something about it. You don't put chemicals on your skin when you're holding a baby inside you. I remember when life was boring, nails didn't look good, hair didn't look great, but you know what? It was for the children that I was willing to do that. And I don't think I even had gum with chemicals in it at the time.
I would go so far to say it's that 6 months, I don't know if you can tell Americans to do a year, but the 6 months even before you conceive, take those same actions, right? Stop
100%.
using, women who are pregnant use natural, zinc oxide, SPF, but when they're not pregnant, we're using avobenzone and oxybenzone and all these different chemicals. Just stop using that stuff and give your body time to detox. And there are things that you can take to help speed up that process and remove the things from the body. And we always get into this conversation of, is it just PC? Is it PC in a binder? So many people want to know because binders have become so popular through various different companies that make them. But it's really, for me, it's about nourishing the body, providing the right terrain. The problem today is that we do not get enough of these healthy fats and oils from our foods.
Right.
And so you need to supplement them, particularly in that like 6-month period. Better if you could do a year. But obviously people are on, timelines that they have. But just clean up your act before. Right. And you will have healthier outcomes.
100%. And the oils, I think, actually are a special call out because I don't think we've ever really shaken ourselves free from the fat-free era.
Yeah,
It really, really imprinted our brains. So people are always focused on protein and carbs in the back of their heads, like when they're meal planning and making choices. Like they're worried, if they are meat eaters, they are worried about sourcing meats. Is it grass-fed? Is it wild salmon? But they're not actually thinking about the oil that they're consuming per meal. And in pregnancy and conception and nursing.
This episode is brought to you by Timeline Nutrition. Are you ready to unlock the secret to boundless energy and vibrant health, no matter your age? Imagine your body as a bustling city with trillions of tiny power plants, your mitochondria working tirelessly to keep you alive and thriving. But here's the catch. These cellular powerhouses are under constant attack from modern life's invisible enemies, toxins, processed food, and polluted air. As we age, our once effective cellular recycling system starts to slow down, leaving us feeling drained. Enter MitoPure, your cellular fountain of youth. This isn't just another supplement. It's a scientifically backed revolution in a bottle. MitoPure doesn't just mask symptoms, it dives deep into your cells, clearing out the cellular clutter and making room for vibrant, energetic newcomers. Imagine recapturing that youthful spark, the boundless energy, the quick recovery, the mental clarity. That's the MitoPure promise. It's not just about adding years to your life, but life to your years. Don't let another day pass feeling less than your best. Rejuvenate your cells, reclaim your vitality, and age with MitoPure. Visit timeline.com/biohack-it now and use my exclusive code Biohack-it. Your future self will thank you.
Wow, you need to eat a lot of healthy fat in order to do that. I mean, my babies were big and they needed a lot of milk. And it was so interesting. This is another little sort of sidebar, but the whole concept of breastfeeding and like the foods that should be eaten in order to sustain healthy breast milk. I had to eat a very, very special diet with tons of grass-fed butter, cream, a fat, lamb with all the fat on it. It was like, for some reason, lamb made my breast milk. Quinoa, there are these special grains that increase milk production.
Yeah.
When I went to the traditional American postpartum, like salad with olive oil and like a soup for my body was shut down. My breast milk, first of all, went blue.
Wow.
You could see it. It was like skim milk. And I barely made enough. The baby was crying in like 2 days. I had to travel with quinoa, make sure that I got all this. I made quarts of creamy milk. I'm tiny. I should not be making.
Same.
It was amazing how
Right.
Important and what OB actually tells the woman to change their diet to enhance their breast milk.
I was teaching my lactation consultant and my postpartum doula and my OB, who was more holistically minded midwives. I was teaching them about what I was doing because I was producing so much milk for my first baby. The second baby, actually, stress really impacted it. For Bear, I had on my table a bowl of PC caps and balance oil caps, and I would just take handfuls as I was pumping. And I pumped and I breastfed. And I like had a whole freezer. I donated the stuff because it got to a point where like I kept breastfeeding him and I was like, I don't need it. Let's give it to somebody who needs it.
Amazing.
But I think that so many people see the oils, PC, balance oil, things like this, as these healthy fats. They see them as supplements. They are not. They are essential nutrients. They are a food, essentially. Like they should be treated as such. And so I think that was a real, and electrolytes, minerals really helped my breast milk production.
Yeah.
But they really helped it to be like fatty and have just that nourishing food.
And spices too, believe it or not. Like cinnamon, cardamom. Like people don't know that the Simon and Garfunkel songs, parsley, sage, rosemary, and thyme, if you eat those, it shuts your milk down. Like actually you eat those herbs when you want to stop lactating. Wow. So if you're having like a healthy salad with parsley, right? Or you're having like so many of these, parsley, sage, rosemary, they can be cut up in tabbouleh and different things. Like You don't know. You would not make any milk. You have to do all the warming spices like cinnamon, cardamom, even turmeric. I used to make golden milk, like warm milk, and put the turmeric and cinnamon in at it at night. And like, so important. Yeah. So important. It's this information isn't anywhere.
Right. This is what you see a lot with traditional medicine and kind of going to more of the traditional practitioners. There's barely any, if not zero, education when it comes to nutrition. What are you doing every day to your body? You're putting something in your body. So you're putting food in, you're fueling yourself, but they're not educated in that and they're not taught these things.
No.
So they're just treating it from like a very like narrow-minded approach to be like, take this medication, just do this and let's see the outcome, versus looking at the person as a whole and treating every aspect of it through deficiencies such as your minerals, through things like your microbiome and fixing that, through what do you actually put in your body in terms of food, sleep, good quality water.
Yeah.
Like, start with the basics. But I think this is where the American medical system fails so many people day in and day out. And it's just a hamster wheel.
Well, there's a fundamental assumption, and I get to speak very candidly because I am an MD, carry a license, and have responsibilities with that. But here's the truth. We're taught that doctors have answers for almost everything related to health, and we're not taught these subjects. Nobody's taught what to eat to make breast milk, period. Nobody's taught what to eat to lower inflammation. We're just taught if inflammation causes heart disease, how to give statins.
Right.
We're not taught how to manage, actually how to make people well. The only doctors that have some sense of that are ones that have had their own personal journey around their own personal struggle. And then they tend to have a vantage point that comes from that unique experience. And it could be vast, it could be singular, it could be anything. But that's generally what opens up the eyes. But we're given license to have very strong opinions about many, 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 many subjects, many of which, like I'll give a very good example. So I was trained first as a surgeon, and then of course my practice is not surgery now. And so as a surgeon, we were taught to have all patients stop all supplements like anywhere from 10 days to 2 days before a surgery, depending on how serious it was, right? And that was just the answer. No, they all cause bleeding, so just stop all of them. Well, there was nothing. There was no paper. There was no understanding of any of that.
Yeah.
So we deal with this on our side now, where patients are on very reasonable, healthy programs. There's no reason for them to stop anything that they're taking, and yet they're made to think that. But there is science that actually shows which supplements might be of concern, and doctors that are trained in those subjects do know these things. I would know what a patient can or cannot take. So it's very interesting how, there are a lot of assumptions being made on expertise that isn't necessarily expertise.
Yeah.
Well, when we sat down, I won't say what it was, but you guys were sharing a story about one of Jess's friends has come to you and is going through something, and the doctor was like, just get off all that stuff, when it's just foundational support.
Correct.
Yeah.
I get this all the time. With patients have serious diseases, they are seeing specialists and they are being put on medications. Guess what? I'm all for that. I have absolutely no interest in taking a patient off a medication ever for any reason. However, that has nothing to do with making them healthy.
Right.
Yeah.
Why would we not make them healthy at the same time that they're getting disease management? They're two separate subjects, and they need to stay in separate lanes. Good news is there are times when they do intersect, and the making them healthy takes the disease away. But we're not going to make claims to that right in the beginning. That's just an eventual outcome if it happens, right? You have to stay in the lane you're in.
Yeah.
But this also brings me to the point that there's a lot of stuff, like let's say if somebody has a disease like cancer in their body, right? So they go through chemo radiation because, they might be in that phase, or that's how their doctor wants to treat them now. Chemo and radiation also have not only do they remove the bad, but they also remove the good. So then that person needs to, how do they become well? Because taking the cancer away is not going to make you well.
They have to build back up that terrain.
So how do we build up that terrain? How do we really heal or support the body during things like chemo and radiation therapy?
Well, the same concepts apply. It just has to do with having a team, really, is what it's.
Correct.
So this steps into a little bit of what I'm going to call the belief system of wellness, right? And because we're a very pharma-driven society, a lot of our beliefs, people's beliefs today, are in line with pharma being the cure and the answer. And if that is in fact the case, then that's where it has to stay. If the belief system is such that they are understanding that the body needs support in other ways and other modalities might be successful and they believe in that, guess what we're actually saying? We're getting the ultimate, which is this silly little placebo effect thing that we think is sort of unscientific. It's not scientific at all. It's getting the brain resonance patterns with healing and the belief system that you will be better in line. It doesn't matter whether you're taking vitamin C or medication. If you believe you're going to be better, you've got a better shot of either or working, right? So that's why I always say, no matter what I'm working with, I have to get a patient's belief system, or their belief system has to already be in line with whatever choices they make on their journey. And it could be, they could be in one very strict lane, and that's okay if that's their choice. And they can be in another lane that's very blended. And if that's their belief system, then they're people there to support.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's such an important way to look at things, because I think, and that applies to any single disease or condition that you're going through, is make sure that your value systems are aligned with how you're being treated. And if you have a question and your doctor gaslights you and says, nope, there's no room for that, then I personally always advise, I think you need to look for a different doctor. Or you find a team that can be collaborative and you have somebody else who you can work with who will hear these concerns and try to treat them for you.
Yeah. I would definitely agree with that. There's no room in medicine for not respecting the patient or not all. Yeah, it's the stories that I hear of how patients are treated on a fairly regular basis, to me, is really, it's a sad statement about how medicine is today and the pressure doctors are under to see patients in certain amounts of time and have certain performance ratios and how they're being judged and things. And I am sympathetic to that. But at the end of the day, we are treating patients, and they need to be honored and heard, and they need to have their time respected, and there is no silly question.
Right.
Period.
Everything counts.
If they can't ask it in front of their doctor, who are they going to ask the question of?
Right. And feel like I'm being acknowledged and seen.
Yeah, exactly.
I wanted to also get into, Jess, you and I have both obviously been patients of Dr. Kristine's. I want to talk a little bit about, in your words, a little bit about your protocol, how you treat patients. Obviously, it varies from person to person, but it's so special. And so I want to talk about, at the Profeta Medical Institute, how are you treating patients?
And it's a conversation, because like Iman and I have seen countless doctors.
Oh, yeah.
Countless practitioners.
And coming to you is...
It's a different ball game. So what is it? Like, what is it that you think is different on how you approach the individual that makes what you do so unique?
So I'm going to give you guys the really fun answer to this question, which is, so in my early years of practice, I was learning more and more techniques. So I'm going to call that the spokes on a wheel period or era. And it was basically, you start with all the standard things, then you step into the tick-borne disease community and you learn about Lyme and all those critters and choices for how you're going to do that. And then you learn about heavy metals, and then you learn about adrenals, and then you learn about hormones. So pretty soon you have all these spokes on a wheel, right? And you can just keep adding to those spokes on a wheel of all these new techniques. Problem is, it's a little exhausting, because you don't have a unified theory. It's like you're going to just do the most likely to impact the patient positively, and then you wait. And if it did enough, fine. And if it didn't, you go on to the next theory, and then so on and so forth. And then all the while, I was studying all of the literature that was coming out on the microbiome science. And I just was reading voraciously about lipid science and all the things that define our cellular health and the mitochondria and our immune system and how all the cellular pathways communicate. And then in 2016, there was sort of this vision that crystallized. I'm going to call it a third dimension, which is basically how our bodies are, and all these different pathways that are emanating from the microbiome, and basically where our immune system is lying right below the gut cells and all the machinery there. I mean, it's seriously like a play in my head. And I could see all of the connections and exactly how inflammation is happening and how we need to address it at the cellular level and how we need to control the biofilms in the microbiome. So from that point, it became a blended program, which you both have experienced, where we have patients on oral supplements and we layer in IVs, and they're a kind of according to, I'm now calling it, with somebody new that I'm training, the different chapters. So the garden variety inflammation most people are walking around with, that has toxins in the mitochondria and inflammation from candida and molds and things like that, even if there is Lyme in the mix, That's all chapter 1 stuff. Like we can get that out of the body in the first phase of treatment. And then there's a second chapter where we get into some deeper organisms and some of the dysregulation in the microbiome that might come from fungus and parasites and such. And that's chapter 2 for some people. And then in some people, we have to go even into chapter 3, where they've had long-standing candida and Epstein-Barr and viruses and things like that. And that's slightly different. So it actually had to do more with like, how do we re-regulate the entire organism in one unified approach, but each patient is individualized according to where their root is. So if their root's in chapter 1, that's where they stay. If it's in chapter 2, we have to go over there, and so on and so forth. So that's the big overarching view.
Yeah, because I thought the way that you treat, and Jess and I obviously, came in, we did the at-home, we did the IVs, we did other stuff. I ended with ozone. I don't know if you ended up doing the ozone therapy. Yeah.
The EBU?
Yeah, the EBU.
I haven't done it yet.
Yeah.
It's awesome.
It was amazing.
I can't wait.
Yeah.
It's so fun.
I'm slow on my IVs.
We all ended up like cleaning our closets at 2 a.m. when we brought EBU in and we were trained on it, and it was hysterical. The
It's
next
just
day,
amazing.
it's really fun.
You just have this like burst of energy. And so it was very interesting the way you took me personally on my journey through the different phases. And I saw like my mood shift, my sleep improved, my HRV, things that were like noticeable differences. And I was like, wow, I'm getting more deep sleep.
My immune health.
Yeah, that's a big one. That's a chapter 2 thing.
That's like, I'm not going to say it because I would never say it, but like, I'm not getting sick like I used to.
Yeah. That was me, to be honest.
Yeah.
That whole chapter 2 thing was me, because I was constantly getting sore throats and fatigue. All it took was one night of bad sleep, and I was like, oh my God.
Crap,
Yeah, that was like, again, like the glands are swollen. I feel like crap. I don't want to have to deal with this. I had kids and busy, and I was like, but I gratefully don't have to deal with that anymore.
And if for people listening to this, they're like, hey, we're hearing all this amazing stuff. If you both had to give some core foundational things that people need to be taking at home in terms of supplements or whatever it is, what is it that food and supplements that they should be doing in today's society? I'll start with you.
Yeah.
So for me personally, I think like when I really started to shift towards eating more protein and fat, that changed my life.
Yeah.
So, drinking clean coffee with cream in the morning, eating a steak for breakfast, like silly things like that I do throughout the day because it just keeps my energy levels up, but I feel healthier overall. I think it's keeping inflammation down. Supplements that are non-negotiable for me on a daily basis that I think are just absolutely foundational. And obviously I'm biased. I own a brand that makes these things, but I see from doctors like Kristine and so many others, how this affects people's health. So PC, my number one by far. Balance oil I take, even though it's still controversial because of the omega-6 to 3. I think that's just absolutely insane. That's a whole different podcast that we could record on that one. And then butyrate for me is also really important. Some other things that I take that I think are really due to my kind of probably genetic predisposition. Liver is always kind of like weaker. I tend towards having thyroid issues. I tend towards having gallbladder issues. So making sure I'm taking some sort of bitters, digestive enzymes, help with absorbing fats, whether that's TUDCA or ox bile, some sort of liver support. And then I think that's really it. I mean, I do some annual testing, which is sitting in my bathroom right now that I haven't done yet. Stool test and urine test, just to like keep me on track with, what probiotics and what gut microbiome things are going on. But those are the basics for me.
And those are really good basics. I think that's a really good way to get people kind of started. And what about you, Dr.
So
Profeta?
I would say ditto
to
all of that. Some detox support is also helpful. So that's, you make glutathione.
Yeah.
That's great for
that's
people.
in there.
Yeah.
I love that. I'll speak a little bit to the food. Totally agree. Fats and proteins. But I think the fat, again, has to be really underscored because people just don't get how important it is. So like, even if you're choosing grass-fed ground meat, choose the 85%, not the 97. Like it's like simple stuff, right? We save the fat from roasts and we'll just use that to grill, not grill, but like use that fat as the beef tallow in order to cook other things. So I think that's the biggest part of it. Like we would not ever consume, even though it's sourdough organic bread, but that's not getting consumed without a big chunk of grass-fed butter. Right. That's so important to get the fats in. And then one just really kind of fun thing is that I'm in the process of making, so my health in the last year had some big challenges and my gut broke down from stress that I was under and was no longer able to reliably absorb a lot of the pills. So I'm in the process of making a supplement that's a sachet form that goes in water to actually get in things.
yeah.
Because if your gut breaks and you can't absorb, which had been the mainstay of my health for the past 2 decades.
Then what do you do?
All of a sudden you're below a bar I didn't even know was there.
I think that's so important.
Yeah, so that's going to be super fun.
And what do you recommend for adrenal support? Because a lot of people are adrenally suffering from adrenal fatigue a lot. So what's your favorite thing for adrenals?
Well, to be honest, organ meats are actually very, very helpful.
Yeah.
Organ meats are not consumed enough. There are so many different supplements. I'm going to say something that's very controversial, but I'm comfortable saying it. It's going to be a bit of a call out. I'm not a huge fan of phosphatidylserine.
No.
I don't know what's going on with that one, but that's a cell danger signal.
Yeah.
And it's used in all these adrenal support products.
Okay.
So I'm comfortable going on record as saying, I don't like it for those reasons. It's an alarmant. It is something the cell sends out as a death signel. So I don't understand why it's being used. Right? You know what I'm talking about, the literature.
The other one that bothers me is alpha GPC or like citicoline. Mm-hmm. It's like, why are you taking these different compounds to just make phosphatidylcholine?
Yeah,
exactly.
just take the
phosphatidylcholine.
Yeah.
And I think that the phosphatidylserine argument is interesting because it's an ancillary phospholipid. It's a smaller phospholipid.
Right.
50% of the outer membrane that protects our cells, protects it from all the toxins that should be outside the cells, not in the cells, is PC. So PC is the most critically important. And then there's other little important ones for mitochondria, and phosphatidylethynolamine plays a big part in those. And those are all critically important as well. They're all in PC, but in BodyBio PC. But this phosphatidylserine on its own or phosphatidylserine in supplements, I think a lot of it really comes down to the fact that most people that want to start a supplement company basically walk into a contract manufacturer and they say, I want an adrenal supplement.
Yes.
And that company then says, okay, tick this box, this box, this box.
Yeah.
Here's your stress supplement.
Yeah, it's very possible.
Yeah.
It's very possible. But so going back to the subject of what to support. So lifestyle is super important, right? Just management of stress and just allowing the body, we have almost no regard for the need to rest in this country. We don't. We have no regard for the need to rest.
I'm concerned about her all the time.
Yeah, you're
it's
when
not
you
the Energizer Bunny. It's past that.
Yeah, I know that. I'm starting to pick up on that, right? It's like you really need to rest. Like I went through a couple big events this last week or two, and I had to just power off for the weekend. I powered off. I was out cold sleeping and then just making like bean soup for my kids, which smelled good and was super easy and not even thinking. And, just really taking care of yourself. We don't do that. We just run so damn hard. And I've been the recipient of that and it blew me out.
Yeah, same.
So I think that's where we have to start with the adrenals, which is actually resting instead of trying to take a supplement to fix them.
Right.
Yeah.
I think that's what so many people do. They're like, I'll just pop a pill because it is that farmer mentality, right?
You probably do.
Yes,
you need
exactly.
to slow down.
I definitely need to.
But I think
take a break.
For me, that slowing down came from being a mother.
Yeah.
It came from recognizing that you can try and fight this and you will get postpartum anxiety and depression.
Yeah.
And you can try to control this baby and you can try to control their schedule. If you're trying to do that, you're putting yourself in that
fight or flight
state, and your central nervous system's so heightened, you're going to end up sicker. You're going to reactivate viruses that are sitting dormant in your body.
Totally.
It's literally what happened to me. And stepping back when the second two were born, it was like, I have to just slow down and relax. And even today, June, I was totally burnt out and just going. And I'm trying to be so much more intentional with where I put my time and my energy,
right.
Where it is on the weekends, where it is when I'm home with the kids, stepping away from my phone and being on all the time,
right.
Because it's so important just to have that time to slow down. And I wish I could get more rest and really trying to make space for that. So many people try to make space for like working out. I'm literally just trying to make space to just sit in a quiet room.
Exactly.
Which is why you're so happy to be in LA by yourself for a few days.
Yeah.
Exactly. I've just loved having both of you on. It was a dream of mine to get you on the podcast. And, having been your patient and seeing you speak at the Well, which was, 7 months ago, the first time I met you. And I was like, Jess, you need to get me in with Kristine. I know she has no space, but I need to be her patient. I waited, by the way, 3 months to get into the practice. And it was one of the best decisions I made. And then it kind of came full circle, right? To have you come out to LA. We're doing an event together, seeing you on the podcast, having had that experience of going through a treatment with you has just been a dream come true. And for you, you have educated me so much on the body's mechanics and really how to start with the simple things, Jess. And I think what you built at BodyBio, what your family has built, is an absolute legacy because you're really helping people feel better.
Thank you.
You guys are really in it, and you're both investing in the better of the average person to heal their bodies and find ways to just feel good. And if you don't feel good, you have nothing.
Yeah.
So
it's about empowerment. And really, Jess, I will speak to it. Without the tools that you offer, it's like a whole different. I remember when I started to learn about all of the lipid science, and that is not even touched. You don't know the slightest thing about a phospholipid.
No,
not the slightest thing. And like, it's the coolest biochemistry out there. Is like the biology of the cell and how it makes. And it's hard for me to actually go back in time and think about life without the tools that I just take for granted. Because I'm not scared of disease. I don't believe I would ever have to deal.
Right.
Like, none of it scares me. My kids go outside. We don't worry about the ticks because we can fix it. It's not a problem. Like, we have dogs that come inside. They stick their nose in the leaves. Yeah. They roll in the leaves. I don't have a panic attack. I'm like, big deal. All right, whatever. If we get a tick, we'll deal with it. Yeah. I'm not, maybe I am silly about it because they shouldn't be rolling in the leaves. But regardless, it's really wonderful to live free of fear of the eventuality of disease, which is what people are living with today. Yeah. And they shouldn't. It is not a mystery how to stay healthy and well.
Right. And I think there's going to be so many people after listening to this podcast who are trying to see you. And I will say, I'm so excited for this next phase of what you are building, and watch this space and follow Dr. Profeta on Instagram. Yeah. And I think there's going to be so many great things coming out of it.
And I'm so glad we got you on social media finally. I mean, just like Kristine needs to come out into the digital world so we can show people how incredible you are.
Yes, I had a very big personal journey to get through. It was a bit of a holdback, but now I'm through and happy to be out here.
Yeah. So obviously anybody listening, please follow BodyBio and Dr. Kristine Profeta. I'll also link everything below, and I hope everybody enjoys this episode. Thank you again.
Thank you.
Thank you.